And so now that we can get our program started, our Master of Ceremonies for today is Guy Shiraki. Many of you heard about Guy last year. He was, for a time, a candidate for governor of Pennsylvania, ended up being the Republican nominee for Congress in Chester and Berks County area. Unfortunately, he did not prevail in that race, but Guy has done many things, including leading the Chester County Chamber of Commerce. He's been a friend of many, well, I guess decades now. Please welcome our Master of Ceremonies for today, Guy Shiraki.
You can shout out. Go ahead. We're here to have fun. We're here to win. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Oh, come on. Come on. Good morning. All right. They're watching on PCN. Let them know we're alive and fighting. The conservative movement is alive in Pennsylvania and ready for victory. I hope everyone noticed that the theme for this conference is building a liberty coalition. There's a lot packed in there about building, growing a coalition. Means there are going to be a lot of people on our side if we're going to win. We may not all agree on everything, but we are united. We're united in knowing what the damage is that the left has done, and we're united in our belief in liberty, in opportunity, and for America to be that shining city on the hill. It is only appropriate as we go forward today in this conference that we begin with a speaker to inspire us. Our first presenter today is Reverend C.L. Bryant. Reverend Bryant is a dynamic speaker, orator, motivator, and gospel preacher. He's a former president of the NAACP in Garland, Texas. His ministry has spanned for decades. He can be seen on television, heard on the radio, and he has his own syndicated program, The C.L. Bryant Show. To begin our conference, to build that coalition for victory, I present to you the Reverend C.L. Bryant.
My friends, I am so glad to be here with you today, and it is a great day in the USA. And I am C.L. Bryant, and friends, if I know you well and I don't speak to you immediately, it's because they put some stuff in my eyes to help me with cataract surgery that I'm coming up with, and I may not see you, and so that may be it. Very glad to be here and glad to have Laura Zork come on before I did, my colleague, and Zach is here as well. Senior Fellow, Freedom Works, Washington, D.C. I've been with them for 13 years, and I've seen an evolution in this country that is indeed amazing, puzzling, troubling, but also there is great advantage, whether you believe it or not, to where we are at this point in time. Freedom Works is the largest grassroots organization in the nation. We boast over 6 million activists on the ground like you throughout our country, and my job has been over the last 13 years to help them build, educate, and mobilize that large network of grassroots activists. And friends, I encourage all of you to go to freedomworks.org, and become a part of this movement, become a part of this organization. And also, after the end of my speech, and I'll be here until tomorrow, I would encourage you to pick up a copy of my book. My good friends Sean Hannity, Alan West, they've all endorsed it, and I'll be happy to sign it for you. And, of course, take a picture with you, all for the American greenback of $20. And I am a capitalist after all. But, my friends, we are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights. Our founders thought it necessary thought it most important to place those words into our founding documents so that generations that would come after them would understand by the simple reading that this is the foundation, and it was the foundation of the greatest nation on the face of the planet. And before I go any further, how many of you know that America is the greatest nation on the face of the planet, the greatest success story the world has ever known? Lincoln, on the field of Gettysburg over 150 years ago, spoke these words, and I want to bring some highlights to what he said here today so that we don't forget who we are and why we are. He said 87 years ago, 87 years at the time of his speaking, our fathers brought forth to this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty, dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Our fathers, some of them came here as serfs, some of them came here as bond servants, some as slaves, some as free men. Our fathers, regardless of where your ancestry may lead you, we're all here in this country now together as Americans after the great split of a civil war that should have destroyed a nation. But because we are a great nation, and because we are the greatest nation that was founded upon the principle of a creator who has given us unalienable rights, at the time that Lincoln spoke these words here on this soil in Pennsylvania, in Gettysburg, he was able to say in hindsight, our fathers, 87 years ago, brought forth to this continent a new nation that was conceived for all mankind, those of us who yearn for freedom. A new nation that is conceived in liberty, dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we stand on a great battlefield. And friends, looking back now over 150 years since he spoke those words, I have come here to you today, hopefully to encourage you, hopefully to build a fire in your American hearts and restore the light of patriotism to our nation. We know that there are some who would like us to go away quietly into the night. We know that there are people who call themselves Americans who would like for us to be quiet about who we are as liberty-loving and freedom-seeking people. But we say to them, from right here in Pennsylvania today at this leadership conference, that we will not go away quietly into the night. We will not sit down. We will not be quiet. We will stand and we will fight for the American principles that our fathers dedicated themselves to. But the question still lingers in the air here in America. The question that Lincoln indeed asked on that battlefield. How long? And Americans truly today, in the midst of all that's going on in your news headlines, truly today, the question is the same as Lincoln asked before. How long can a nation such as ours, one so conceived, how long can it endure? I never thought that I would be here in this time in 2023 saying to you or asking to you or even questioning whether or not a nation such as ours, a nation so conceived, can long endure. And friends, I certainly hope that all of you have come here today to at least do your part in making sure that our republic continues to still stand. I crisscross this nation once a month, almost every month, many times on behalf of Freedom Works, and many times because someone has called me to come and speak. And I see that there is something on the faces of Americans that an Eastern Bloc refugee pointed out to me some years ago when I spoke in Bend, Oregon. He said, CL, there's something on the face of Americans that we in the East have not seen before. And I asked him, what was that? And he said it was fear. And Americans, whether you know it or not, there are countries around this world who have always looked to us for leadership, for strength, for encouragement. But even now, on the faces of Americans, the light of this world, they are beginning to see fear. They are beginning to see us in a state where they understand that we are being hoodwinked. We are being bamboozled. And our children are being swindled out of their American heritage. We ask ourselves, how does this happen? How do we get to this place? And I want to say to you today, in too many cases, it is because the churches of this country are failing the congregants. And a faith-based nation like we have been, even in our founding, is failing in what our founders saw could be for a people of moral character. But for the first time in our nation's history, children from the ages of 7 to 17, over 65% of them have never been into a church, a synagogue, or a mosque. And it's a very bleak and daunting picture for those of us who are growing older in age, who understand and understood what this country was and how we are devolving into something that certainly resembles third world tactics. What are the pastors missing? What are the pastors not saying? What are they not understanding? Perhaps it is the mission of Christ himself. Christ said that he came to set the captives free. And pastors, in your congregation, there are many people who have to go out and face the Caesars of this world. And because of political correctness, there are certain things that you are beginning to leave out of your sermons on Sundays. And you're leaving your congregants unclothed and certainly exposed to the attack of political wolves in this country. If you're a pastor here today and you're saying that I can't get involved in politics because it is something that certainly is not scriptural or something that perhaps Jesus wouldn't want you to do, then that tells me that you don't understand the mission of Christ. The political structure and the religious structure of his day was the Sanhedrin Council, the Pharisees, the Sadducees. And he came and took them head on. He came and overturned tables. He came with a righteous anger over how they were manipulating and how they were duping God's people. He came to set them free. It cost him his life. It cost him a crucifixion. And the American pastor today understands the story of Christ, but they don't understand the mission of setting the captives free. And the one thing I feel that so many of them are afraid of is that crucifixion. And many of you may be afraid of that same crucifixion. But let me tell you that our nation is dying. And our nation can die if, in fact, we don't understand the nature of what the mission is. And friends, without that crucifixion, and with Easter Sunday breathing down our backs, and with Easter Sunday coming, the day that we celebrate the resurrection of our Lord, it is time for us to understand, pastors and congregants of the churches, that without the crucifixion, without them coming after you with sharp objects, without them trying to tear you down and destroy you, without the crucifixion, there is no resurrection. And my friends, the resurrection of America is certainly necessary now, because there has been certainly a purposeful destruction of our moral character. He came to set the captives free. And your mission as Americans, understanding who we are and why we are and the light that we have been, your mission as Americans, the mission that this nation, I do believe, was founded to be, a light to the world. Jesus said it himself, you are the light of the world. You're the salt of the earth. But if the salt loses its savor, its ability to salt, if it loses that, Americans, if we lose our salt, if we lose our ability to influence the world, those words still ring true to us, then what good are we? But to be thrown out and to be trampled under the foot of men. You can hear those jackboots coming for your freedom. You can hear them. But in your churches, you're singing louder as the trains that are headed to the places of destruction are passing by. And we just sing louder. But our actions have not displayed the character that Americans are known for throughout the world. It's time for us to turn our faces back toward home. My friends, the slave does not necessarily seek freedom. The slave seeks comfort. Progressive liberals have found this out from the slave master many, many years ago. The slave will trade his freedom for more food in his bowl, for a roof that doesn't leak over its head. The slave will trade his freedom for a paycheck that comes without work. Americans, you are slowly being enslaved. And my friends, it is time now for you to wake up and understand that the tools of our destruction are truly working on our young people, because they love free stuff and they love your stuff. They want your stuff because they may never accumulate things in the way it is going on their own. So that presents a certain peril for all of us who have worked hard and have experienced the American way of prosperity and success. There is a generation coming behind us that is slowly being suffocated by the principles of big government. I want to leave you with a story here today about a young girl whose father loved constricting snakes, boa constrictors. When she's about 12 years old, she got her own boa constrictor. It was only about 2 feet long at the time. And she fed it, she cared for it, she nurtured it. And it began to grow. Over a period of time, that boa constrictor, of course, would climb into bed with her because it was a pet, wrap itself around her leg, her arm sometimes, and release, and go back to his snakish ways. As it began to grow even larger, it became 6.5 feet long. And one day she noticed that it had stopped eating, but she also noticed that when she woke up, the constrictor was wrapped around her in the mornings. Because it wasn't eating, she took it to the veterinarian and asked if there was anything wrong with her snake. And the vet examined the snake and, of course, said that there was nothing wrong with it, except that it was purging itself. It was starving itself because it was getting ready to consume a very large meal. And he had a very good reasoning in his idea that the meal that might be in the reptilian mind of that snake was her. You see, friends, you may think that swamp creatures, you may think that the reptilian government in our country, because we're able to handle it, because we've nurtured it, and because the only feeding that that government gets financially is you, we may think that it's our friend. We may think that it's something that we can play with and ignore the stranglehold and the chokeholds that it has upon us. But if we ignore that, we will be playing with the folly that this young girl was playing with that boa constrictor. We are beginning to feel the constriction, the compression. Many are feeling it much worse than others. But believe me, if we don't do something now, if we don't make certain that the stranglehold of big government is not released on our American spirit, our American economy, and certainly on the integrity of our American school system and our American voting system, it is preparing now to swallow a big meal. And that is the American taxpayer, the American voter. My friends, it is time for you to stand up and push back. My father was a World War II veteran. My grandfather was a World War I veteran. My great-grandfather was a Spanish-American War veteran. This is my country, as it is your country. But as Lincoln said on the battlefield of Gettysburg, 77 years ago, our fathers brought forth to this continent a new nation. He had gotten me a brand new bike when I was 7 years old. I was riding that bike in my neighborhood. And a bully comes along and he pushes me off of that bike and takes it, rides off on it. I tried to catch him. He was bigger, stronger, and faster than I was, so I ran home and got my father, who was there on Sunday afternoon. Told him the story. He asked me, did I know where the guy lived? And I said, yes. He said, get in the car, let's go get your bike. And when we drove up, I saw my bike in the yard. My dad said, is that your bike? He says, yes. I says, yes. He looked at me with those old veteran eyes of his, and he says, well, you go get it. Well, I thought that since he drove me around there, he would go get it for me. But no, what he wanted to do and what he wanted to see, my friends and my fellow Americans, is what his son was made of. And being more respectful of him than being fearful of this bully, I got out of the car, marched over to where my bike was, and just about the time that I laid hands on my bike, the bully laid hands on me, and we had one heck of a fight right there in his front yard. And yes, he got the best of me, tattered, torn, bloodied, all of that I was. But friends, I got to tell you, I rode off. I rode that bike home that day. You get home. Mother's fixing Sunday dinner. She sees me bruised, torn, bloodied. My father comes in with a peculiar smile on his face. She says, what in the world happened? She says, I want you all to sit down. My dad says, I want you to sit down. And I want to tell you both this. I'm an only child. He said, I worked hard, and I work hard to keep a roof over our head, food on our table. My father was in the restaurant business. I work long hours. And I want you to know that I don't ever want either of you to let anyone take from you anything that I have worked hard and paid for. Don't ever let anyone take anything from you that we have scuffled for without a fight. And that's what, my fellow Americans, I encourage you to do today. I encourage you to take account of what our fathers have bought and paid for with blood. Take account of that and be loved, my fellow Americans. If we let anyone, Democrat, Republican, whoever they are, anyone, take from us what our fathers bought and paid for, not without a fight. And that is what we are here to do, is to fight back against those who would rob us. And there is one question that I will leave with you today, and it is up for you to answer this question. It is a question that I've asked across this country for the last 13 years to crowds big and small, crowds just like this. And that question is, are there any patriots left in Pennsylvania? Is there anyone here who will stand up for God and country, who will stand up for America, who will stand up for the Republic? Then Americans, stand up, stand up, stand up. God bless you. God bless America.